In a hospital room, an old woman is living out her final days. Her daughter, Caroline, stays by her side at all times. The weather is turbulent. There's a hurricane approaching, but the girl is only worried about her mother's condition. Understanding that her death is inevitable, Caroline is doing everything she can to ease her mother's final days. The aged mother tells her daughter a story about a clock that ticks backward. The story takes place during World War I. A blind clockmaker and his wife had an only son who went to the front lines. Sometime later, they received a death notice and then his body in a coffin. After burying their only child, the clockmaker continued working on a clock commissioned for the city train station. However, the death of his son affected him so deeply that when the clock was unveiled during a grand ceremony, it turned out the clock ran backward. According to the clockmaker, this would allow the boys who died in the war to rise and return home, including his own son, so they could have lived normal lives. After that, the man disappeared. Some said he sailed away in a boat, others that he died of a broken heart. Suddenly, the elderly woman makes a strange request. At her urging, Caroline pulls an old handwritten diary in a leather cover from her mother's bag and begins to read. It turns out to be the diary of Benjamin Button, who entrusted his astonishing story to pen and paper. Benjamin was born on the festive night the city celebrated the end of the war. A happy father rushed to his wife, only to hear a few last words from her. She died immediately after giving birth. She made him promise to take care of their son. Approaching the cradle and pulling back the corner of the blanket, he didn't see a cute baby, but a terrifyingly wrinkled face, like that of a very old man. Screaming in horror, the father grabbed the baby and ran out of the house. At first, he wanted to throw the grotesque child into the river, but a policeman chased him. While running, Mr. Button ended up at the doorstep of a nursing home. He placed the baby on the steps and tucked a few bills into the folds of the blanket before leaving. A nursing home worker named Queenie appeared on the stairs with her fiancé. Seeing the deformed baby, the woman didn't abandon him. Instead, she decided to raise and care for him as her own, since she couldn't have children herself. She called a doctor who examined the child and diagnosed him with a rare condition, premature aging. At birth, the baby had the health and body of an 80-year-old man. The doctor predicted he wouldn't live long. Everyone around tried to convince Queenie to send the child to a special institution, but she refused. She chose to keep the baby and stay with him to the end. Life in the nursing home wasn't bad for the child. The elderly residents weren't shocked by his appearance. Although Benjamin was a toddler at age 3, sitting in a wheelchair, he looked like a small, hunched old man. That's how he saw himself, too. The doctor's prediction turned out to be wrong. The boy kept living, though he couldn't walk and used a wheelchair to move around. On Saturdays, Mama Queenie would take him to church, hoping God would allow her to conceive and Benjamin to walk. One day, a pastor called them forward and loudly asked the Lord, with theatrical gestures, to grant them their wishes. He turned it into a little show. His gestures toward Queenie weren't unusual, but somehow, he actually made Benjamin stand up and walk. The congregation rejoiced. But just as the boy walked, the pastor collapsed and died. From then on, 7-year-old Benjamin walked with crutches. Life at the nursing home went on. Some residents died, others arrived. Benjamin met many interesting people who taught him various things. A short, talkative pygmy named Odie showed him the world beyond the home and treated him to beer. Odie loved traveling and passed on his taste for adventure to the boy. When Benjamin once ended up alone on an unfamiliar street, he had to find his way home on his own. Those were his first steps into the real world. He was tired but happy.
It had been the best day of my life.
We briefly return to the present. The hurricane is nearing. Nurses and attendants entering the room are concerned the storm will be strong. Despite this, the mother asks Caroline to keep reading the diary. On Thanksgiving Day in 1930, Benjamin saw his father for the first time. He didn't know who the man was. Mr. Button watched the boy, who to everyone else still looked like a little old man. That same day, Benjamin met Daisy, a pretty girl with blue eyes. They became friends. The two of them made a very unusual duo, being almost the same age. To everyone else, they looked like a teenage girl and a balding elderly man with glasses. Those unaware of Benjamin's condition viewed their friendship disapprovingly. But Daisy and Benjamin understood each other perfectly, shared a mutual attraction, and told each other their secrets. The most amazing thing? Daisy turned out to be the same elderly, dying woman whose daughter was reading Benjamin's diary. Caroline realized it immediately. Time passed. Queenie gave birth to a daughter. Her daily prayers hadn't been in vain. Benjamin became more independent and started interacting with other people. One woman taught him to play the piano. During this time, Benjamin began to notice that his hair was growing thicker and his body was getting stronger. He had long since forgotten about crutches and a cane. He now walked on his own. One day, Queenie let Benjamin, then about 15 years old, go for a walk to the port. There, he accidentally ended up on a tugboat and got hired as a deckhand. The captain, a drink-loving man, took a liking to the old-looking young sailor. Upon learning that Benjamin had never been with a woman, the captain took him to a brothel. The prostitute assigned to the old-looking boy was extremely surprised by his capabilities. Realizing that money could buy many things and having gained his first sexual experience, Benjamin returned home. A car pulled up beside him. Inside was Mr. Button, who had finally decided to connect with his son. Without revealing his identity, the man invited Benjamin for a drink. They sat together for a long time, talking and drinking. Benjamin described that day in his diary as the moment he became an adult. He was becoming more and more attracted to Daisy. One day, he brought her to the tugboat and asked the captain, now his friend, to take them on a river cruise. Despite the risk of losing his license, the captain agreed. Benjamin and Daisy had a romantic morning cruise, during which he began to notice changes in his body. He started to suspect that he was growing younger. Eventually, he decided to start living independently and set off on a long voyage. As they parted, Daisy asked him to send her postcards from every place he visited. Fate separated Benjamin and Daisy. She enrolled in ballet school and pursued a career as a dancer. Benjamin traveled the world on the tugboat with the familiar captain, sending postcards to Daisy from every port. One day, the captain noticed Benjamin looking better and more youthful. Benjamin brushed it off with a joke, though by then, he was certain he was aging in reverse. During their travels, the crew stopped at a hotel called the Winter Palace. There, Benjamin met Elizabeth, a married woman of average looks and middle age. To Benjamin, she seemed very beautiful at the time. One night, he came down from his room to the lobby and found Elizabeth there, also unable to sleep. They sat and drank tea. They struck up a conversation. Elizabeth told him about the places she had visited. They enjoyed each other's company. Something was drawing them together. They met every night in the lobby and talked until morning. Benjamin continued writing letters to Daisy, and in one of them, he shared that he had met a wonderful woman and had fallen in love. At that time, he considered Daisy a childhood friend and Elizabeth the woman he loved. Their romance was beautiful and mysterious. At Elizabeth's request, they only met at night and always parted by morning. They never confessed love to one another. But that didn't stop them from being happy and enjoying their feelings within the rules they'd set. Suddenly, that happiness came to an abrupt end. Elizabeth didn't show up. She simply disappeared from the hotel. Soon after, Benjamin learned that war had broken out. Elizabeth left only a note that read, "I'm glad I met you." He never heard from her again. The American president sent the fleet to Japan. The tugboat that Benjamin served on was mobilized for military service. When the ship's cook left, Benjamin offered to take the job as the ship's cook. The captain agreed. The tugboat arrived in a war zone. They came across a ship struck by an enemy torpedo, surrounded by the corpses of sailors. It became clear that the tugboat would be the next target, and the crew prepared for battle. The night silence was shattered by machine gun fire. Bullets struck drums and metal structures on the ship. In the dark, the tug collided with an enemy submarine and sank along with it. That day, 1,328 people died, including the captain. Benjamin, who survived, gave the savings of one of the fallen sailors to the man's widow. He said goodbye to his fallen crewmates. The war made him realize how unnatural it is for young people to die. After the war ended, Benjamin, now 26 years old, returned home. But he looked about 40. Still, the loving heart of Mama Queenie recognized him without fail. Rejoicing at her adopted son's return, she firmly decided to marry him off and help him find a job. Soon after Benjamin's return, Daisy came to visit the nursing home. Their reunion was joyful and friendly, but Benjamin now looked at Daisy not as a childhood friend, but as a beautiful woman. He invited her to dinner at a fancy restaurant. She told him about civilian life, from which the war had kept him away for so long. After dinner, they walked in the park near the restaurant, and Daisy danced. She was drawn to Benjamin, but he turned down her subtle invitations to intimacy, suggesting instead they take a walk or listen to some music. Benjamin was surprised that his body kept getting younger. Not long after, his father came to visit. He told Benjamin about his business, producing buttons. Then, mustering his courage, Mr. Button admitted he was Benjamin's father and planned to leave him the factory, since his health and strength were failing. Shaken, Benjamin returned home and told Queenie what had happened. The woman reacted with outrage. Some time later, Benjamin came to his father at night. He took him to the harbor to watch the sunrise together. It was both a farewell and a reconciliation. Soon after, his father passed away. Benjamin traveled to New York and went to the theater where Daisy danced, bringing a bouquet of flowers. He made his way backstage. Daisy invited her childhood friend to a party with her friends. After attending the party, Benjamin felt disappointed and left. He watched Daisy dance and laugh with her friends. He realized she had a boyfriend. He had hoped she would run into his arms and say how happy she was to see him. But that didn't happen. She had another life. Benjamin and Daisy lived in different cities, but never stopped thinking about each other. One day, Daisy suffered a terrible accident. She was hit by a car and broke her legs in 5 places. Her dancing career was over. Benjamin visited her in a Paris hospital, but they quarreled again, and their paths diverged once more. A few years later, Daisy returned to New Orleans and met Benjamin again. The former old man had grown so young that he now looked like her peer. This time, a romance blossomed between them. They sailed off together on a yacht. They enjoyed their love. Then Queenie, Benjamin's adoptive mother, passed away. After her death, the couple moved into a separate home. Daisy became a dance instructor. They were happy and lived the way they wanted to. One day, Daisy told Benjamin she was pregnant. Their joy was mixed with fear that the child might inherit the father's rare condition. In due time, Daisy gave birth to a healthy, beautiful girl. They named her Caroline. She was the same Caroline reading the diary to her mother, Daisy. Reading her father's diary, Benjamin understood that he was not aging like everyone else. He was getting younger. That meant he couldn't be a normal father or husband. He sold the business and property, put the money in an account for his wife, and left.
And so that you and your mother might have a life.
Benjamin traveled the world, taking whatever work he could find. He met all kinds of people, but he never forgot to send a postcard to his daughter for every one of her birthdays. Daisy married a good man and lived happily with him. One day, Benjamin returned to see his family. He looked about 20, and he and Daisy realized that separating had been the right decision. And yet, they still felt drawn to each other. They made love in a hotel room and then parted ways again for many years. Their next meeting happened when Daisy was already an elderly woman and Benjamin looked like a teenager. He was living in a care facility, suffering from dementia and forgetting everything. Daisy could no longer leave him. By then, her daughter had moved away and her husband had passed. She devoted all her time to the boy, who was really an old man. Benjamin kept getting younger and forgot almost everything. Daisy took care of him like a child, just as everyone else saw him. The old station clock was taken down and replaced with a new one. Soon, Benjamin, now an infant, died in Daisy's arms. Before dying, he suddenly remembered his life. Daisy saw it in his wise, sorrowful eyes. When Caroline finished reading the diary and listening to her mother's story, the storm was raging. The hurricane flooded the basement where the old station clock was stored. The girl ran out of the hospital room to see what was happening, and Daisy passed away, whispering Benjamin's name. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this.